uh, uh, kind of general picture, general assumption about the spies that is totally related to Islam. Um, it is historically grounded. If you look at the map, for instance, Southeast Asia, all the area, all the area who were involved in the maritime commerce, or in term of sorry, long distance trade from Indian Ocean to South China Sea, they become Islamized. Um, Nowadays, we have Indonesia, Malaysia, Moro in the southern Philippines, Batam in the southern Thailand, the very stronghold in South Asia. And that's area, maritime area of Southeast Asia, sorry, maritime area of Southeast Asia, and they are strongly involved in the trading networks, in which spice is one of the most important products. It was wanted in the international market. So that's why from that point, I will. I think we need to look at back. What's the factor that spice is very much related to Islamization? I think this was a spice which makes the question of Mas Hauckson mentioned that why Islamization is so the time was Islamization was so complete in there like Indonesia and Java and many other area. It's different question from it's different from the area which now mainland South Asia, Cambodia, Thailand, and then Laos. They are not solely Islamized. Islam exists, Muslim exists, but it's very minority. I think in this case we need a new perspective to understand about why spice is very much lead to the Islamization was so intensive, so massive along the area in maritime area in Southeast Asia. Well, we have a lot of theory about it, like for instance, the edge commerce, like the edge kind of commerce by Anthony Reid. We have also kind of a little bit similar explanation by Lombard in Nusa Java. But I think we need to address certain specific issues about that. And I think here I will address about some point, like for instance, one of them is network. Network is very important. But before that, further expansion about network, I think we need to clarify that network is not mean, it doesn't really mean transmission. If you look at mention some of the work from colonial time, like Sniprogonia and then some of the scholars, they turn to lead our knowledge or perception that there's a one-way network from one-way transmission from Middle East to Southeast Asia. In this morning, we heard it's nice Azumari Ajar talk about the Greek tradition in Southeast Asia, which means that the kitab written by such great ulama like Asingkili, Al-Fatani, Al-Embani can be categorized as Greek tradition. So I think network is very important. That's kind of process of Islamization. So instead of understanding network as a kind of transmission of Islam from the East, I will say that in the 13th century, I mean, around 13th century and 14th century, network is meant like I will say people-to-people network. Here, I mean, for example, people in trading area in South Asia, Indonesia, is very familiar with the coming of merchant like Bengal, Gujarat, Arab, and Persian in Indonesian land.
Maaf, Prof. Derajat. Maaf, ini sudah tampil apa belum? Kami sudah bisa tampil ya?
Sudah, sudah.
Oke. Monggo ditunjuk halamannya supaya bisa kembali.
Okay. And they contribute to making the archipelago become part of the Indian Ocean world. This Arabic-speaking Mediterranean. It is the term by Drakar. I think it's a nice, good article about Arab-speaking Mediterranean. We have there's some work question like Saudi about the Indian Ocean as well, and but this very much from the perspective of India, and I think we need to deal with that issue because what happened from the 13th century when Islamization was so massive and commerce grew considerably. Also, it's also related to what happened in the Indian Ocean. So I think next time we have to make an agenda of research very seriously about Indian Ocean during the 15th century until the 15th or 16th century. The second one, still network actually, but I like to say with Islamic habitus. So the local people of the archipelago not very familiar with the Muslim, but also that's how the Indian Muslim live in Kali Center, make social contact with local inhabitants, adapt to their language and custom, and married local women. So all this appear as a channel through which they search to expand the Muslim circle. I don't know what happened, but if you look at, for instance, like today in Indonesia, a lot of people like to be associated with NU. I know I have some friends, but basically not NU actually in terms of activities. It's not a part of the pension family and so on, but they don't like to be part of the NU. So this is something which people like to do that. And Islam at that time, so many people were very proud of being associated with Islam, of being known as the Islamic, as they're close to the Islamic people at the time. So that's the way I think that the very beginning period that Islam was slowly adopted by the people, local people in Southeast Asia, and the Arab or Indian who come to merchant who also look for the spice. So I think until today, if you look at the Indonesian people, it's very how to say, well, they are happy to be known foreign people, apalagi West or Arab or Indian. So that's kind of thing I think make kind of cultural push to Islamization within the society. Next, okay. Now I turn to Hikayat Raja Pasai. It's take from pre-colonial period around 15th century. This is very how to say, it reflect what people think about the network. One of the content of the Islamic text, Hikayat Raja Pasai, about the Islamization in below Duin, the land below Duin of Pasai Kingdom, and basically the text authors recognize the crucial importance of Mecca, source of Islam, the carrier of Islam. But at the same time, the way they Islamize the people of Hikayat Raja Pasai, actually Pasai Kingdom, I think, in my opinion, they think they need a guide from someone from Ma'bari, name is Pakir. Ma'bari is an area in Indian Ocean. It's like Coromandel, East Coromandel. Morrison said this is Coromandel. Ma'bari is the term also from Arabic, denote the area around the Coromandel. So the text recognized the important role of Pakir from Ma'bari, from Indian Ocean, to help make Islamization very further. I'm not going to talk about how Islamization is presented in the text. It's very mythical, actually, imagine. But the thing is that the stories follow the story of the people which recognize the crucial role of the area which is Indian Ocean. So that's why in the previously I said that the Indian Ocean is very crucial in the development of this Islamization in Southeast Asia. Another point is spice Nikaya. Yes, saya smile is come from Mecca. Once we come to Sunda Pasai to Islamize the rural and the area, and then one people living from Mecca, he come to rural to Raja, and Raja then, oh, you are living okay, and this is correct. Give from me for you, and give very much related to the spice, because the name or the products we mentioned in the text is like camphor. I don't know, many books, many products get to spice. So network which I think which involve Indian network is become part of the way of thinking among the people in the archipelago at the time, the 20th century, and Hikaraya Pasai is one text talking about it. The next text is Bustan Salatin, that's very important. Bustan is written by Aramiri, and Bustan is presented different kind of Islamic writing tradition. So that's why I would say that Islamic turn in my historiography, because different from my historiography like Sejarah Melayu, Kat Aceh, Kat Pasai, in the sense that Islamic tradition, Islam is taken the main source of reference. So the Islamic element within Bustan Salatin is very strong. And also the story of, for instance, the people, the Islamic people in India, in other Muslim countries are presented in such a way in Bustan Salatin, which actually there's 7 volumes, it's a very big book. So that's why one should say that it's more or less a translation of the Islamic source in Persia and India, which they got it for the Muslim in Asia. I say that Bustan is not just historiography, but also it's Malay Kitab Jawi. So here, like the Kitab Jawi at the time, it was written by the ulama, like Pansuri, Asmatrani. This Malay Bustan Salatin also part of the Kitab Jawi grew up during the 10th century, and from the 15th, 16th century. So alongside the aspect of Malay Islam lingua franca, Kitab Jawi or Sabah Kitab, it's also mentioned Sabah Kitab, and it's medium for religious expression. So, but I think there's also here we can see what I said, it's cultural enrichment, because they adopt the Islamic substance to some extent. They adopt the script in Arabic script, but the substance is very much related to Southeast Asia or to Malaya. So this, what I said, is a cultural enrichment we can be found in Kitab Jawi, and one of them is Pisau Salatin. And the next, so we are talking about the network, not just network from Malaya to Mecca among the ulama, no, but also the very broad understanding of network within the trader, merchant, and also the network to like Kitab Jawi and so on and so on. Now I want to address the network within the archipelago. I think we know already. Abdul Rauf is a great Sufi teacher in Southeast Asia. One of the students is Syekh Ulaka. So that's a kind of spiritual network from Aceh, Abdul Rauf Asingkili with Syekh Ulaka in West Sumatra, the west coast of Sumatra. And from Syekh Ulaka, because Syekh Ulaka studied Sufism to Abdul Rauf, and he established Ulaka as a surau, actually, by the same time a Sufi center, because from that he made kind of Islamization to the whole area in West Sumatra. Start from the west coast, Padang Pariaman, gradually went into the direct area with sophistic approach. I mean, Christian Dobin said that the Islamization in the West Sumatra is very much smooth. There's no disruption to local culture. There's no changes, radical change to local tradition. They just become Muslim, and Islam then adopted as part of the adat of Minangkabau. In addition, so there's a kind of network between Aceh and West Sumatra. And in the case of West Sumatra, because Aceh also I can powerful in the western coast of Sumatra, because the ruler of Aceh had power in the the area of Western Barus and then Padang Pariaman, sorry. In the western part of the coast until southern part of the area. And it's probably because the area is very much rich with the spice as well. But at the same time, we also constantly Minangkabau Dato, ulama Sulawesi, Dato Ribandang, Dato I'm sorry, I forget the name. But the three Minangkabau Dato. So this ulama came to Sulawesi to Islamize the kingdom by the people of Sulawesi. And it means also they kind of connecting people, connecting land between Sumatra and Sulawesi. And from Sulawesi atau di Bandang also went to Kutai to Islamize people in North Kalimantan. There's a text about that, Hikayat Kutai. Demak also was recorded as have Islamized Kalimantan, and Gresik and Lombok and Ternate. So all the areas of modern Indonesia already connected to Islamization, connected because of Islamization, the ulama. At the same time, there's some economic aspect of it which is related to commerce, and this is supposed to lead to spice. The next one is so I think very important. So network is not only in the between Indonesia, atau Asia and Mecca or Madinah, also among the ulama in the archipelago. And I think I will explain later. They laid the foundation for the rise of Indonesia as a nation. Next,
please.
Okay. This Palajawa. Palajawa is a special area in Ternate, which I think Topani, which reminds people of Ternate on the extension of Japanese community introduced to Islam in 16th century. One of the princes of the Ternate was sent to study Islam in Giri Gresik. And after a few years studying Islam there, they came back to Ternate, but he also studied. He took a lot of people from Java and also part of Minangkabau to Islamize or to accomplish their agenda of Islamizing people of Ternate. So they stay in a specific place near the harbor in Ternate named Palajawa. And now Muslim still important today. So I would say that's the kind of memory collectives among some people that they are part of each other. And also, and this is because of the Islamization and also because of newcomers. The next one is the Gain Kitab Jawi. When Arabic script, Malay Kitab in Arabic script become new identity marker of the people in the archipelago. This is based on the experience of Snukrugonya when he met in Mecca, someone from Imam Masjid, the Imam of Mosque in Bacan. Snukrugonya asked, what were the kitab people there use, the people of the eastern part of the archipelago had for the Islamic knowledge. And the Imam then gave a list of the kitab which were circulated in the eastern part of the archipelago. And beside the kitab, the Arabic kitab, you know the Pesantren, but also there are some kitab Jawi which were written by ulama from the western part of the archipelago. Patani, for instance, the kitab by Patani, so the kitab by Al-Palembani, already written, already read by people in the eastern part of the archipelago. Including the book Sabil Muhtadin by Al-Banjari, which is the correction to the book by Araniri, Siratul Mustaqim, because he said that the Siratul Mustaqim is too much Aceh in dialect, so the people in the archipelago hard to understand that kitab, so that's why Al-Banjari wrote the kitab Sabil Muhtadin. And that kitab was also in the list of the kitab that were used and circulated by Muslim in the eastern part of the archipelago. So the next one, I think the last one.
Next, please.
Yeah. So so the experience of being Islamized created collective memory among Indonesians, which life and today and nowadays, they were once linked to each other. And this experience, the long historical process, shaped the formation of what more recently called emerging community, a leading foundation for the development of Indonesian nationalism. So I will say that this morning we talk about hadith, for instance, we say that serving the country, Hubul Khaton Minal Iman, is part of the Islamic faith, as is by Ketua PBNU, Pascal Siraj. I will say that in the beginning, Islam is very much circled to the rise of feeling of religious people. They are once linked each other by the Islamization. Yeah. And of course, this Islamization also pretty much based on the spice trading within the area. So spice is not just influence in terms of Islamization, but also I think in the long run they also created the kind of what I said, the foundation for the establishment of Indonesian nationhood, because we are the Muslims are very easy to get to accept the nationalism. We are very close to national leaders and to contribute to the formation of national state. So that's the point which I think that spice is a civilization and something that to address in the future. So yes, I agree with Tiger Freeman that we don't have to think about the Western aspect of the spice. But in this case, I think I talk about spice very much within the context of Islamic development and the nation state of Indonesia. Okay, thanks very much, Pak Moderator. Saya kembalikan.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jajat Burhanuddin, for your great presentation. So before I give to the next speaker, I would like to summarize from Professor Jajat's presentation. Due to the maritime network, especially the spice routes, people in Nusantara had intensive contact with Muslim traders from overseas, especially from Bengal and Gujarat. And disconnected has created the habitus, Professor Jajat Burhanuddin said the habitus, Muslim habitus, that can also created Islamic intellectual network. And this network becomes stronger, particularly because of the introduction of text Java, Kitab Jawi, Kitab Jawi, which is contain the teaching of Islam. And the experience of being Islamized, according to him, actually helped pave the way for Indonesia after colonialism period to accept the idea of nationalism. I think this is the summarize of Professor Jajat Burhanuddin's presentation. Thank you so much. Dan selanjutnya saya akan panggil presenter atau speaker kedua, second speaker, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Isom El-Saha. Apakah Dr. Muhammad Isom sudah bersama kita?
Sepertinya belum, Pak. Lanjut aja.
Oke.
Saya telepon belum nyambung.
Alright, saya berusaha menghubungi beliau, tapi juga belum diangkat teleponnya tadi, Pak Dekan. Baik, saya pikir ini pesertanya banyak yang dari Indonesia ya. Saya mungkin berbahasa Indonesia ya. I'll switch my English to Indonesia. Saya persilahkan.
Mungkin bisa diresum dalam bahasa Indonesia, Pak.
Oke, ya baik. Saya akan sedikit memberikan brief resume tentang materi tadi. Jadi karena jaringan maritim, khususnya jalur rempah tadi, memungkinkan orang-orang di Nusantara melakukan kontak yang sangat intensif ya dengan para pedagang-pedagang Muslim dari Bengal dan dari Gujarat, dan hubungan ini kemudian menciptakan sebuah habitus ya masyarakat Muslim ya, dan disitulah kemudian terjadi apa yang disebut tadi sebagai Islamic Intellectual Network, jaringan intelektual Islam. Mungkin prosesnya tidak sesederhana itu ya saya kira ya, dan jaringan intelektual ini semakin kuat ya ketika diperkenalkannya Kitab Jawi ya, yang itu menjadi penanda identitas ya bagi Muslim di Nusantara ini ya. Dan ini yang kemudian pengalaman terislamkan ini kemudian belakangan bisa melempangkan jalan bagi umat Islam di Indonesia khususnya pasca kolonial ya untuk menerima gagasan tentang nasionalisme dan ide-ide tentang kebangsaan. Saya kira itu sebagai kesimpulan singkat ya dari saya selaku moderator ya. Baik, ini kita ada pertanyaan. Benarkah Wali Songo pada masa sekitar abad 14-15, berarti di era perdagangan rempah terjadi, memiliki peran besar terhadap prosesi dan bahan-bahan tumpeng yang sebelumnya tumpeng bukan berbentuk nasi kerucut ini. Saya nggak tahu ini Prof. Burhanuddin bisa memberikan respon atau tidak.
Mungkin saya akan coba jawab, tapi tidak terkait dengan tumpengnya.
Ya.
Jadi gini, Wali Songo semuanya memang hidup pada masa rempah, dan dia tumbuh atau mereka tumbuh sebagai kekuatan politik itu dengan rempah. Kalau Anda lihat kan begini sebenarnya, waktu itu kan kalau Sriwijaya memang udah mati, udah hilang di Sumatera, kan kemudian tumbuh berkembang sebagai kerajaan kecil seperti masa Pasai. Di Jawa itu waktu itu yang berkembang adalah Majapahit. Jadi itu ini contoh Islam Indonesia itu kan nggak baru. Ketika Sumatera sudah diislamkan lewat Sriwijaya, lewat Sumedang Pasai diantaranya, maka di Jawa itu berdiri Majapahit. Dan Majapahit itu hidup Buddhis. Nah, cuman kemudian pada mulai tahun 1500-an itu Majapahit yang sangat luar biasa itu menerima sebuah boost of economic luar biasa, the growing commerce yang sangat luar biasa, yang berlangsung di wilayah-wilayah pantai utara, mulai Demak, terus kemudian sampai Gresik, sampai Surabaya. Nah, Wali Songo itu semua di situ, ada di situ. Nah, ini memang kayak sesuatu yang tidak terantisipasi secara politik. Anda bisa bayangkan, jika sebuah kerajaan kayak misalnya bukan kerajaan, dia politis, Demak dan lain sebagainya, itu punya kekuatan luar biasa secara ekonomi, secara budaya. Islam sebagai budaya agama mereka, lalu kemudian ekonomi karena mereka terlibat dengan maritim yang sangat intensif. Saya lupa berapa jumlah rempah yang dijual waktu itu di beberapa catatan sejarah ada sejumlah. Dan luar biasa sekali. Nah, karena itu mereka orang kemudian melihat, maka kerajaan Majapahit udah nggak relevan lagi. Karena para kekuatannya di tangan mereka. Nah, itulah kemudian yang puncaknya 1528 Majapahit diserang. Tapi sebenarnya tinggal runtuh. Karena apa? Karena konteks kerajaan Majapahit itu sudah nggak lagi relevan untuk konteks perkembangan sosial politik di Jawa pada abad 16. Karena apa? Karena semua daerah-daerah pantai itu berkuasa yang kuat. Nah, itu yang dimaksud dengan kosmopolitanisme Islam sebenarnya. Karena apa? Mereka satu corak keagamaan yang sangat inklusif, gitu ya, terbuka, dan kemudian juga beranjak pada perkembangan yang tadi bilang soal nasionalisme. Jadi Islam yang inklusif terbuka karena mereka basisnya di perkotaan, waktu itu di daerah pantai. Lalu ada juga sebuah pola pembangunan baru di mana misalnya konsep kaya itu sudah berubah. Dulu di kalangan ketika kerajaan Majapahit masih berkuat, itu konsep kaya itu kan sangat feodalistik. Orang yang punya tanah, luas dan sebagainya. Nah, waktu itu terjadi transformasi alam pikir orang-orang Jawa. Di mana yang kaya itulah orang yang punya saham di benda bergerak, kayak misalnya kapal, perdagangan rempah. Jadi so mentality luar biasa waktu itu. Nah, apa yang disebut sebagai Wali Songo itu dalam suasana seperti itu. Makanya tahun 1528 ketika kemudian Demak menyerang Majapahit itu just about time. Di Majapahit sudah nggak relevan sebagai sebuah kerajaan di tengah arus perubahan yang luar biasa. Nah, mungkin juga sih prosesi dan lain sebagainya dia berpengaruh. Karena apa? Karena tadi kita bilang soal tradisi Islam Nusantara bahwa ada sebuah proses yang terus menerus di mana Islam menerjemahkan pada konteks lokal budaya Jawa di pedalaman termasuk. Karena apa? Karena Islamisasi pada prinsipnya itu berjalan lewat masyarakat, gitu. Karena kerajaan-kerajaan besar itu kan hancur. Di Sumatera, Sriwijaya hancur. Di Jawa, Majapahit juga runtuh. Gitu. Nah, karena itu kemudian Islamisasi berkembang demikian sangat kuat itu lewat masyarakat. Itu yang terjadi. Gitu. Nah, karena itu wajar kan kalau NU itu kan tumbuh sebagai society, sangat civil society NU itu. Makanya saya kira NU nggak perlu dekat dengan negara, tapi negara yang perlu dekat dengan NU. Ya, negara perlu dekat dengan NU, iya, untuk apa? Untuk memperkuat beberapa agenda-agenda NU, diperkuat, gitu ya, diintensifkan dan sebagainya. Gitu. Tanpa negara juga NU sudah kuat. Gitu. Nah, lain dengan Malaysia itu berdasarkan saya tidak ngomong Malaysia dan ini, tapi saya katakan bahwa sesungguhnya si Jawa memang keagamaan itu sangat terkait dengan kehidupan masyarakat. Memang ada kerajaan termasuk Mataram, Islam dan sebagainya. Belakangan ya. Tapi itu bekerja atau itu berdiri ketika Islam sudah sangat berkembang di masyarakat kuat dan itu nggak terbendung terus menerus seperti itu. Jadi bisa jadi Bu Sahinovita ada prosesi yang disebut dengan tumpeng dan sebagainya karena itu bagian dari sebuah proses penerjemahan Islam dalam konteks lokal culture yang berkembang di masyarakat. Saya kira itu.
Oke. Saya kira penjelasan yang sangat bagus sekali dan komprehensif tadi ya. Selanjutnya saya persilahkan barangkali ada pertanyaan yang lain ya. Saya persilahkan. Oh, rupanya tidak ada atau belum ada. Oke, ini sebentar kita lihat. Nah, ini dia. Disampaikan pada paparan tadi, paparan yang awal tadi bahwa the triumph of Islam was so complete, dikaitkan dengan space route of Islam Nusantara dengan 4 teoris, Gujarat, Arab, Persia, dan China. Sepertinya Islam Nusantara mampu menjadi kekuatan dan membawa pengaruh yang signifikan dalam peradaban Islam saat ini. Bagaimana menurut Prof. Jajat?
Saya kira sudah, kalau Islam Nusantara itu sudah berpengaruh saat ini.
Oke.
Memang saya sedikit tidak begitu, mungkin berbeda dengan Pak Jumardi aja ya. Menurut saya sih perumusnya yang paling konkret Islam Nusantara itu pada abad 19. Kalau saya lihat kitab-kitab yang klasik, kitab Jawa yang berkembang pada abad itu sangat detail sekali ngomong soal Islam. Gitu loh. Berbeda dengan abad 17, meskipun akarnya di abad 17 sampai 18, tapi formulasi yang paling kuat abad 19. Kitab-kitab tentang misalnya sufisme yang mengarah pada Al-Ghazali itu kan semakin kuat terumuskan pada abad setelah Al-Palembani. Karena apa? Karena saya kira Al-Palembani itu corong utama sufisme Al-Ghazali. Dia menulis minimal 2-3 buku terkait dengan itu, bahkan Syiar Salikin itu 4 jilid ngomong soal sufisme Al-Ghazali. Al-Fatani juga membuat satu kitab, diterjemahkan kitab Al-Ghazali dan memberi syarah, namanya Minhajul Abidin. Lalu kemudian fikih saya kira jelas. Fikih itu diarahkan untuk memperkuat Syafi'i. Nah itu belum muncul semua pada masa Ranir. Tapi eksplisit dikatakan fikih Syafi'i itu baru sangat kuat pada abad 18-19. Itu pada Sabil Mu'tadir yang tadi saya tampilkan di PowerPoint, itu karangan Al-Banjari. Lalu ke Al-Fatani sangat jelas sekali. Jadi di semua karya-karya dia tentang fikih itu, dia mengutip atau menyebut di pendahuluannya itu ini dicarikan dari banyak kitab-kitab di Timur Tengah yang bermadzhab Syafi'i. ABCD tulis nama kitabnya dan juga para ulama. Jadi Syafiyah yang kemudian menjadi satu pilar dari Islam Nusantara bersama dengan Al-Ghazali pada masa bidang Sufisme itu terumuskan dengan sangat solid dan establis pada abad 19. Lalu kemudian teologi agak menarik menurut saya. Teologi itu karena kan Sunni teologi itu kan bukan hal mudah untuk diterjemahkan. Itu sangat apa namanya? Ya advance gitu dan sebagainya. Ternyata saya menemukan di abad 18-19 kalau nggak salah 5 kitab lebih yang mensyarahkan sebuah atau menerjemahkan sebuah kitab namanya Ummul Barohin karangan Yusuf Al-Sanusi, itu karangan seorang ulama dari Algiers sekarang di Timur Tengah. Ada 5 kitab Jawi lebih bahkan yang yang menerjemahkan dan mensyarah kitab Ummul Barohin. Akhirnya kemudian muncul menggelinding sebuah konsep sifat 20. Nah, sifat 20 itu semacam rumusan populer dari teologi Sunni yang berkembang terus hingga sekarang. Saya nggak tahu, waktu kecil saya di daerah Bogor itu disuruh untuk menghafalkan wujud kidambaku dan seterusnya. Itu sekarang sudah nggak ingat lagi. Dan itu ada ternyata itu esensi dari sifat 20. Dan banyak kitab yang dibuat untuk itu pada abad 19, termasuk untuk konteks Jawa Barat, saya kira mungkin kalau dari Syekh Usman. Nah, untuk Jawa itu kan ada istilah akidah second, akidah 50. Itu kan kira-kira itu menampilkan sifat 20, sifat yang wajib 20, yang bisa 20, yang jaiz 41. Terus ada sifatnya buat Nabi itu kan sama 9 jumlahnya. Dibuatnya 50. Makanya di Jawa itu ada namanya akidah aqaid second kalau nggak salah. Tapi kira-kira itu. Nah, jadi sifat 20 itu rumusnya yang paling populer, yang berkembang di masyarakat, teologi Sunni, yang berkembang terus hingga kini sejak abad 19. Nah, saya melihat sesungguhnya itu yang menjadi inti dari yang kemudian berkembang menjadi the essence atau substance of Islam Nusantara. Jadi kalau Anda ngomong soal Islam Nusantara itu tadi Pak Jumadi yang menegaskan itu sufinya Al-Ghazali yang Amaliyah, terus kemudian bukan sufi yang eksesif, terus kemudian fikihnya fikih Syafi'i, dan itu diekspresikan dalam berbagai kitab dan sebagainya dan seterusnya. Dan saya juga ini ya
1 menit lagi.
Oke. Jadi itu. Jadi saya melihat bahwa Islam Nusantara sebagai sebuah Islamic Orthodoxy itu sebenarnya established untuk Islam Nusantara, dan saya kira itu menjadi benteng bagi kita dari sebuah gerakan-gerakan yang let's say fundamentalism atau gerakan terorisme yang against plurality, against toleransi dan sebagainya yang kita sama-sama menjunjung.
Baik.
Terima kasih banyak, saya kira Pak Moderator.
Terima kasih banyak Prof. Burhanuddin ya. Sebuah paparan yang sangat menarik ya. Jadi saya sekali lagi menyimpulkan bahwa apa yang disampaikan Prof. Djajat Burhanuddin tadi sangat menarik ya, terutama komen beliau tentang bahwa the essence of Islam Nusantara was actually happen ya in 19th century ya. Jadi pada abad ke-19 ya, dengan munculnya tulisan-tulisan lengkap tentang ajaran Islam dalam berbagai bidang, tasawuf, teologi, fikih, dan lain sebagainya. Dan yang terakhir beliau mengatakan bahwa Islam Nusantara adalah benteng yang kokoh untuk mengcounter ya ajaran-ajaran Islam yang atau mengcounter ide-ide gagasan Islam yang radikal, Islam yang penuh dengan violence dan kekerasan. Baik, terima kasih Prof. Djajat Burhanuddin atas paparan-paparannya yang sangat menarik, dan saya mohon kepada seluruh peserta untuk menampilkan diri ya, membuka kameranya. Kita akan foto bersama, panitia akan melakukan foto bersama. Saya persilahkan. Oke, mohon panitia untuk bisa memotret.
Sedang berlangsung.
Oke.
Oke, sudah. Terima kasih.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih sekali lagi saya sampaikan kepada Prof. Jaja Burhanuddin atas waktunya dan presentasinya yang sangat menarik. Dan demikian tadi para peserta yang saya hormati, sesi kita kali ini, dan mari kita tutup dengan membaca hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Atas nama moderator saya mengucapkan terima kasih dan mohon maaf jika ada kekurangan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Para peserta yang saya hormati, kita akan melanjutkan nanti sesi berikutnya 5-10 menit lagi. Kita sedang mengatur pembicara dan moderator. Terima kasih Pak Arief atas,
terima kasih Pak
dan juga
Dr.
Pak Jajat
Suwaidi.
presentasinya.
Saya masih bertugas ya sebagai discussion.
Ya, melanjutkan. Ya, Pak Jajat melanjutkan sebagai discussion. Oke, terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Saya tunggu dulu. Belum Mas ya, main terus.
Ya,